I work on a research station on the moon. Something is following us. I want to start by saying that I am not the kind of person who writes things like this. I am a geophysical instrumentation technician. I have a master's degree from the University of Edinburgh. I have spent 11 years working in some of the most remote and hostile environments on Earth before I ever applied for the Artemis Extended Surface Program. I say this not because I think it will make you believe me. I say it because I need you to understand what I am giving up by writing this. My career ends the moment this goes public. My security clearance, my pension, the consulting contract I have been building toward for 6 years. All of it ends. I am writing this anyway, because 3 weeks ago, I watched a man I have known for 4 years walk out of an airlock in the direction of something that should not exist, and I've not slept more than 2 hours at a time since, and I need someone outside this program to know what is happening on the south face of Shackleton Crater before they send the next rotation up here, and the same thing happens to someone else. My name does not matter. My station designation is Aries 7. We are located at 89.7 degrees south latitude, approximately 4.2 kilometers from the crater rim. There are 6 of us on the current rotation. There were 7 until 22 days ago. I am going to tell you everything in the order it happened because I think the order is important. I think the order is the thing that nobody at Mission Control wants to talk about. Because the order means this was not an accident, and it was not a malfunction, and it was not the kind of isolated incident that gets classified and buried and forgotten about between rotations. The order means it was a process, and processes do not stop on their own. Chapter 1. The first reading. We arrived at Aries 7 on a Tuesday in the 3rd week of January. Rotation handover with the outgoing crew takes approximately 18 hours, and the outgoing lead, a Norwegian woman named Signe, who I have worked alongside on 2 previous rotations, pulled me aside during the equipment walkthrough and told me something I did not understand at the time. She said the external LiDAR array on the south-facing panel had been throwing anomalous readings for the last 6 weeks of their rotation. She said they had logged it with Mission Control, and Mission Control had told them it was thermal expansion differential in the mounting bracket. She said they had replaced the mounting bracket at week 4, and the readings had continued. She looked at me with an expression I could not fully read at the time. She said, "Just make sure you log everything." Then the transport lifted, and they were gone, and I did not think about what she said for another 9 days. The LiDAR system on the south panel exists to monitor the terrain within a 400-meter radius of the station for structural hazards. Micrometeorite strikes, regolith displacement, equipment that is drifted out of its secured position. It runs a full sweep every 4 minutes and logs anything above a certain density threshold. On day 9 of our rotation, the sweep flagged an object at 187 meters south-southeast of the station perimeter. The reading lasted 0.3 seconds and then was gone on the next sweep. I logged it as possible equipment debris because we had conducted an EVA 2 days prior and it was plausible that something had been displaced. On day 11, it appeared again, same bearing, 187 meters, 0.3 seconds, gone. I flagged it to our mission lead, a man named Dr. Yusuf Okafor, who is one of the most methodical and careful scientists I have ever worked with. And he told me to increase the sweep sensitivity on the south panel and see if we could get a longer reading duration. We increased the sensitivity. The next reading was 186 meters, 0.4 seconds, then nothing for 3 days. I want to be precise about the distance, because the distance is what started to make me uncomfortable before I could articulate why. 186 meters, 187 meters. In 4 weeks of elevated monitoring, we never once got a reading below 183 meters or above 191 meters. Whatever was out there was maintaining a consistent distance from the station perimeter, not a fixed point, a consistent radius. And on the moon, in the airless static environment of Shackleton Crater's southern slope, where there is no wind and no thermal convection, and no geological activity of any kind, things do not move on their own. Things that maintain a consistent radius around a fixed structure are not doing so by accident. Chapter 2. The Archive. It was Marcus who found the Apollo data. Marcus Chen is our communications and systems engineer, and he is the kind of person who, when something bothers him, goes looking for every piece of related documentation that has ever existed, rather than waiting for an explanation from above. He spent 3 nights going through the digitized telemetry archives from the Apollo 17 mission, which landed 380 kilometers north of our position in December of 1972. He was looking for anything anomalous in the surface scanning data from that mission. He found it on the 4th night and called me into the communications bay at 2 a.m. station time, and did not say anything, just turned the screen toward me. The Apollo 17 surface scanner logged an anomalous density reading on the 5th day of surface operations. It was attributed at the time to equipment calibration error, which was a reasonable assumption in 1972. The reading was south-southeast of the landing site. The distance from the landing site to the reading was recorded as 200 meters. Marcus had overlaid our LiDAR data on the Apollo data, and the bearing was not identical because we are 380 kilometers from the Apollo 17 site, and the moon is a sphere. But when he adjusted for spherical geometry, the corrected bearing from Apollo 17's position pointed directly through our station and continued south-southeast to where our readings were coming from. Whatever the Apollo 17 scanner picked up in 1972 was on the same trajectory as whatever our LiDAR was detecting now. Not the same location, the same trajectory. As if something had been moving, slowly, in the same direction for 50 years. As if something had been following the presence of human beings on the lunar surface since the first time human beings had arrived. Marcus wanted to report it immediately. I told him to wait 1 week and gather more data because I did not want to be the rotation that caused a program-wide alert over a trajectory analysis built on a single 1972 anomaly and 6 weeks of 0.3-second LiDAR hits. I should have let him report it. I will carry that decision for the rest of my life. Chapter 3. What Yusuf Saw. Yusuf saw it on day 31. He was conducting a routine external inspection of the south-facing solar array at 0640 station time, which is approximately 90 minutes before the start of the main work period, which is why he was alone outside. The inspection is a one-person task, and he had done it 40 or 50 times across his various rotations. He was at the far end of the array, approximately 60 meters from the main airlock, when he stopped moving. I know this because I was at the monitoring station inside, and I had his helmet camera feed on one of the secondary screens, not as the primary focus of my attention, but visible. He stopped moving and stood facing south for 4 minutes and 17 seconds. I noticed the stillness at around the 2-minute mark and called his name on the comm. He did not respond. I called again at 3 minutes. Nothing. I was in the process of waking our safety officer when at 4 minutes and 17 seconds he turned around, walked back to the airlock, cycled through, and came inside. He took off his helmet and sat down in the corridor and did not speak for a long time. When I asked him what he had seen, he said, "Nothing." When I asked him why he had stopped moving for 4 minutes, he said he'd been checking a fastener and his comm had been malfunctioning. I checked the comm logs. His comm had been functioning perfectly. I said nothing about the logs. I don't know why. Something about the way he said it. The flatness. Yusuf is one of the most expressive people I know, and when he said those two words, nothing and malfunctioning, there was nothing behind them. Not evasion, not fear, just nothing, the way there is nothing behind words on a page. That night I went back through his helmet camera footage, frame by frame. At the 4-minute mark, 1 second before he turned around, something moved at the edge of the camera's range. The helmet camera has a documented range of approximately 200 meters in full sunlight. The object was at the edge of that range, which meant it was approximately 200 meters away. I ran the bearing against our LiDAR data. It matched. Whatever our LiDAR had been logging for weeks at 183 to 191 meters, Yusuf had seen it. And whatever it had done to him in those 4 minutes and 17 seconds had made him come inside and lie to me with a flat voice and eyes that looked like someone had turned a light off behind them. Chapter 4. The Pattern in the Logs. I am a geophysical instrumentation technician. Numbers are what I trust. So when I stopped being able to trust what I was seeing in the people around me, I went back to the numbers. And the numbers told me something that the 6 weeks of LiDAR data alone had not told me. The object was not maintaining a consistent distance from the station. It was maintaining a consistent distance from the nearest human being outside the station. On the days we conducted EV as it moved, the LiDAR readings shifted bearing and distance in real time as our personnel moved across the surface, always maintaining between 183 and 191 meters from whoever was furthest from the airlock. On days with no EVA, the readings were fixed south-southeast, and the distance was fixed at between 185 and 189 meters, centered on the outer wall of the south habitation module, where the sleep quarters are. It was not following the station. It was following us. It knew the difference between an empty structure and a structure with people in it, and it positioned itself at the edge of whatever distance it had decided was appropriate, and it waited. I need you to understand what that means. I need you to sit with that for a moment before I continue. Something that is not human, in an environment where nothing living has any business existing, has been maintaining a precise radius around human beings on the lunar surface since at least 1972. Not attacking, not retreating, maintaining, waiting, deciding somehow what the correct distance is, and then holding it with a consistency that our instruments cannot explain, and that no natural phenomenon on the moon could produce. The Apollo 17 astronauts walked on the surface for 3 days and went home, and nobody followed up on a single anomalous scanner reading. And whatever was out there watched them leave, and then began its slow 50-year drift toward wherever human beings were going to show up next. It knew we would be back. It had been waiting for us to come back, and now we were here. And it had found the distance it preferred, and it was keeping it. And one of my colleagues had gone outside and stood still for 4 minutes and 17 seconds and come back wrong. Chapter 5. Doctor. Okafor. I tried to talk to Yusuf about what I had found in the LiDAR data on day 34. I brought the printouts. I sat across from him at the workstation and I said, "Yusuf, I need to show you something." And he looked at the printouts for a long time without speaking. And then he said, "We should not be looking at this. Not we do not understand this. Not this needs to be reported. We should not be looking at this." I asked him what he had seen on day 31. And he said he had not seen anything and that I should stop asking about it. His voice had the same flatness it had had that morning in the corridor. Not hostile, not afraid, just flat. The same way a room sounds flat after all the furniture has been removed. I left the printouts on the table. The next morning they were gone, and when I checked the printer log, it had been cleared. Yusuf had been at the workstation at 0340 station time. He had deleted the LiDAR archive for the previous 40 days. He had also drafted a message to Mission Control, which I found in the outbox queue before it transmitted, requesting that the south panel LiDAR array be taken offline for maintenance. The message cited thermal calibration issues in the mounting bracket, the exact same language from the outgoing rotations log, the exact same language that had been used to explain away these readings for at least one previous rotation, possibly more. I pulled the message from the queue. I do not know if that was the right thing to do. I do not know if anything I have done since day 31 has been the right thing to do. What I know is that when I confronted Yusuf about the message, he looked at me with those flat, empty eyes and said that the array needed maintenance and that some things were not our business and that I should think carefully about what I was trying to start. I went to my bunk and I lay there for a long time in the dark, and I thought about what Sina had told me during handover, log everything, and I thought about the 4 minutes and 17 seconds. And I thought about the fact that whatever was out there had now been maintaining its radius for 35 days. And I thought about Yusuf standing at the end of the solar array with his back to the station and his face toward 200 meters of nothing. And I started keeping a separate personal log on a device that is not connected to the station network. Chapter 6. Day 47. I am writing this section on day 51. I am writing it from memory because I did not have my personal device with me on day 47, and I want to be accurate about the sequence of events before more time passes and the edges blur. On day 47, at 0520 station time, the internal pressure alarm triggered in the south airlock. This alarm triggers when the outer door of the airlock opens, without the inner door having been sealed first, which is a safety protocol violation that should be physically impossible given the interlock system. I reached the airlock 30 seconds after the alarm. The inner door was sealed. The outer door was open. The airlock was empty. Yusuf was not in his bunk. Yusuf was not anywhere in the station. His suit was gone. His personal locator beacon was on the equipment bench, removed from its mount on his suit collar, still active, blinking its patient green light at the wall. He had gone outside, and he had left the beacon behind, which meant he had gone outside knowing that we would not be able to track him, which meant whatever he was doing out there, he had planned it, or it had been planned for him. We went to full emergency protocol. Dr. Alina Vasquez, our medical officer, attempted to raise Yusuf on all SUTCOM frequencies. Nothing. I was at the LiDAR monitoring station, and I will tell you what I saw. At 0523, 3 minutes after the alarm triggered, the LiDAR showed a reading at 188 meters south-southeast. At 0524, It showed two readings, one at 188 meters, one at 6 meters. The second reading was moving toward the first. At 0526, the two readings merged. At 0527, there was one reading at 188 meters. At 0531, there were no readings. By 0545, there was nothing on the LiDAR at any bearing at any range. By 0600, when the rest of the crew had assembled and we were preparing an emergency EVA, whatever had been maintaining its radius around our station for 51 days was gone. And so was Yusuf. We conducted a surface search for 4 hours. We found his boot prints in the regolith, the clear, deep impressions of a suited human walking south-southeast from the airlock. We followed them for 190 meters. At 190 meters, the boot prints stopped. There was no sign of a fall, no sign of a struggle, no disturbance in the regolith beyond the boot prints themselves. The prints simply stopped, at the exact distance our LiDAR had been logging, as if Yusuf had walked to a specific point and stepped off the edge of the world. We found no other tracks of any kind. Whatever had been out there at 183 to 191 meters, whatever our instruments had been logging and Yusuf had seen and stood facing in silence, it had left no trace in the regolith at all. Nothing that weighed anything. Nothing that pressed down. Nothing that displaced the fine gray powder that records every contact on the lunar surface. Whatever it was, it had been there for 50 years without ever leaving a single mark in the dust. Chapter 7. What Mission Control said. Mission Control classified Yusuf's disappearance as a suit integrity failure within 6 hours of our report. They told us the working hypothesis was rapid decompression following a micrometeorite strike on the suit's primary pressure membrane. They told us the boot print stopping was consistent with catastrophic decompression causing immediate incapacitation and the suit's emergency retrieval system drawing the body upward, which is not how the emergency retrieval system works and has never been how it works, and any first-year program trainee would know that. They told us the LiDAR anomalies were consistent with debris from the suit breach event. They told us the search was complete and that we should return to normal operational parameters. They asked us to confirm that the south panel LiDAR array had been taken offline for maintenance per Dr. Okafor's request. I confirmed it had not, and that I had intercepted the request before transmission. There was a 22-minute delay before Mission Control responded. In the response, they told me that the array would need to be taken offline for a firmware update to be transmitted in the next scheduled maintenance window, and that this was standard procedure and did not require any discussion. That was 11 days ago. The LiDAR array is still running. What it is showing me now is what I need you to understand before I tell you why I am writing this today, on day 51, with 12 hours left before the scheduled firmware update, that I believe will end my ability to monitor what is out there. The readings resumed on day 49. 48 hours after Yusuf was gone, 48 hours after the LiDAR showed nothing, the readings came back. Same bearing, same distance, 183 to 191 meters, south-southeast, 4 minutes between sweeps, never there on 2 consecutive sweeps, but always there on enough sweeps that the pattern is unmistakable. It came back. It is still here. And on day 50, when our botanist doctor, Priya Nair, went outside to conduct a routine check on the surface growth experiment modules, I watched on the LiDAR and I watched on her helmet camera, and at 14 minutes into her EVA, the reading appeared at 188 meters, and her walking pace slowed, and she stopped, and she stood with her face toward the south, and I called her name on the comm, and she did not answer for 2 minutes and 11 seconds, and then she turned around and came inside, and she sat down in the corridor, and she said nothing, and her eyes were flat. Chapter 8. What I know now. It was not following us from Earth. I want to be clear about this because I think it matters. The Apollo 17 data is from 1972, which is the first time human beings spent more than a few hours on the surface. Apollo 11 was 1969. Apollo 12 was 1969. Neither of those missions logged anomalous surface scanner readings, and both of those missions were shorter surface stays. Apollo 17 was the longest surface stay before the program ended. 72 hours on the surface. Enough time for something that had been waiting to move closer, to find the right distance, to learn, in whatever way it learns, how near was near enough. And then the program ended and it waited again. And we came back and it found us immediately, within the first 2 weeks of the first long-duration surface occupation, which means it was either tracking us or it was already here when we arrived, already on the south face of Shackleton Crater, already occupying the terrain we chose to build on, for reasons of its own that had nothing to do with us until we showed up and became the closest thing to it for 384,000 kilometers in any direction. I do not know what it wants. I do not know what it did to Yusuf in 4 minutes and 17 seconds, or what it did to Priya in 2 minutes and 11 seconds. I do not know what happens to a person when they stand 188 meters from something that has been patient for 50 years, and silent for 50 years, and present for 50 years, and apparently harmless for 50 years, until suddenly it is not. I do not know if Yusuf is dead. I do not know what dead means in a context like this one. I know that he walked toward it, and 2 readings merged on my screen, and then there was 1 reading, and then there were none, and there is no suit debris, and there is no body, and there are boot prints that stop at 190 meters in regolith that has not been disturbed by anything that has weight. I know that Priya came back inside and her eyes were flat, and she has barely spoken in 2 days. And last night at 0340, I checked the airlock log, and she had been standing at the inner door for 11 minutes before going back to her bunk. And I do not know if she was thinking about going outside, or if something was asking her to go outside, or if there is any difference between those 2 things anymore. The firmware update is in 12 hours. After the firmware update, the LiDAR will be offline, and Mission Control will conduct a diagnostic that will take between 3 and 5 days. And when it comes back online, the archived data from our rotation will be gone, and the readings will either be explained away or ignored, and the next rotation will arrive, and they will be told about thermal calibration issues in the mounting bracket, and they will log anomalies that last 0.3 seconds at 183 to 191 meters south-southeast. And at some point one of them will go outside and stand still for 4 minutes, and the process will continue. The process has been continuing for 50 years. The process is patient. Whatever is out there has been patient longer than the human spaceflight program has existed, longer than the Apollo era, longer perhaps than we are able to document. It was here before we arrived. It will be here when this rotation ends. It will be here when the next rotation arrives, and the one after that. It has a distance it prefers, and it maintains that distance, and it waits and it watches, and something happens to people who stand within its range for long enough, and Mission Control knows this, and mission control is not telling anyone. And in 12 hours, the firmware update runs, and my ability to show you the numbers ends. I am going to try to transmit this before then. I have a personal communications device that is not routed through the station's primary comm array. The bandwidth is low, and the latency is high, and I do not know if this will reach anyone. If it does, I need you to find the Apollo 17 telemetry archive before it is cleaned up. I need you to look at the surface scanner logs from December 13th, 1972, the 5th day of surface operations, bearing south-southeast from the landing site. I need you to look at what the Artemis II survey drones logged in the Shackleton South Face region in 2024, the pre-settlement survey, before we built anything down here. I need you to look for a density reading at the edge of sensor range that appears for 0.3 seconds and then disappears. I believe you will find it. I believe it has been in the data every time we have ever looked at this part of the moon, and we have called it a calibration error every single time, because the alternative is something that mission control has decided we are not ready to know. I am ready to know. I need you to be ready too. Because in 12 hours the LiDAR goes dark, and I will have no way of knowing where it is, or how close it has come, or whether Priya goes to that airlock again tonight, and this time opens the door. And if she does, and if the readings show two signatures merging into one, and then one signature fading to nothing, I will be alone on a research station on the moon, with whatever is maintaining its radius outside my walls, and it will be 384,000 kilometers to the nearest person who does not already know about it and has decided to look away. And the distance is exactly what it has always been, and the patience is exactly what it has always been. And I am beginning to understand that the most terrifying thing about it is not what it does when it gets close enough. The most terrifying thing is that it has always been close enough. It chose this distance. It can choose a different one whenever it decides to. It simply has not decided to yet. If you are reading this, I am still inside. For now. Log timestamp. Day 51, 1433 station time. Aries 7, Shackleton Crater, 89.7 degrees south. LiDAR reading, 186 meters. Duration, 0.3 seconds. Bearing, south-southeast. The next sweep runs in 4 minutes. I will let you know what it finds. 4 minutes. And whatever is out there already knows I am waiting. It was already watching before I started looking. It has always been watching. That is the part they never put in the briefing documents. That is the part Sina could not say out loud on handover day. That is the part Yusuf understood after 4 minutes and 17 seconds in its presence, and could not unlearn, and could not live with, and could not stop walking toward. The sweep just ran. 186 meters. It is still there. It is still waiting. And I am starting to understand that the waiting is not passive. The waiting is the thing it does to you. The waiting is how it works. You know it is out there at 186 meters, and you know it has been there for 50 years, and you know it is patient in a way that nothing patient has ever been patient before. And every 4 minutes, the sweep runs and confirms it is still there. And you sit in your station on the moon, and you feel the distance between you shrinking in your mind, even though the numbers say it has not moved. And you think about Yusuf standing at the end of the solar array, with his face turned south. And you think about Priya standing at the airlock door at 0340, with her hand not quite touching the handle. And you think about how 186 meters is very far, and also not very far at all. And you think about what it would feel like to just go see. That is how it works. That is what it is doing right now. I'm not going outside. I'm not going outside. The next sweep is in 4 minutes. Addendum. Day 52, 3:17 station time. I did not sleep. I want to document that. I have not slept in a meaningful way since day 47. And I am aware that sleep deprivation produces cognitive distortions, and I am aware that everything I am experiencing could theoretically be filtered through that fact. And I am telling you this because I want you to understand that I have considered it. I have considered it very seriously, and it does not explain the LiDAR data, and it does not explain the Apollo 17 archive, and it does not explain the cleared printer logs and the intercepted message and the firmware update that is now 6 hours away. And it does not explain what I found when I went through the station's full communications archive at 0200 station time when everyone else was in their bunks. There have been 8 Artemis extended surface rotations at Ares 7. We are the 8th. I have now read every communication log from every rotation that has not been purged, which is 5 of the 8. And in every rotation there is the same sequence. Anomalous LiDAR readings beginning approximately 2 weeks after arrival. A request to mission control asking about the readings, followed by a response attributing them to calibration errors. A follow-up request, usually around week 4 to 6, followed by a response attributing them to thermal expansion in the mounting bracket. And then in 3 of the 5 rotations I can access, there is a gap, not a purge, a gap. The kind of gap you get when someone is composing a message and then decides not to send it. The kind of gap that means a person sat at a communications terminal in the middle of the lunar night and started to type something and then stopped. And the system logged the session timestamp, but not the content, because there was no content. Because the person had started and stopped and started and stopped, and finally closed the terminal without sending anything. In 2 of those 3 rotations, the gap falls on the same relative day as a logged EVA that ended with the crew reporting suit communications malfunction. In 1 of those rotations, the gap is on the same day as a medical event that is listed in the rotation summary as acute disorientation due to hypoxia, subsequently resolved. I have read the medical event report 3 times. The oxygen levels in that crew member's suit were normal throughout. There was no hypoxia. There was a crew member who went outside and stopped moving, and came back and reported feeling confused and disoriented, and mission control logged it as hypoxia. And the rotation continued, and that crew member flew home, and I do not know what they carried home with them, or what they see when they stand at windows at night and look at the sky. What I am telling you is that this is not the first time. This is not an isolated incident. This is a pattern across multiple rotations spanning at least 3 years of continuous occupation, and Mission Control has the same logs I am looking at right now. And Mission Control has been managing this information the same way they manage all information that they have decided the public is not ready for, which is carefully and quietly and with a consistent cover story that sounds reasonable until you put 8 rotations of logs next to each other and read them in sequence and see the shape of what they have been hiding. I do not think they are hiding it because they are malevolent. I have spent 11 years in this program, and I do not believe the people at Mission Control are bad people. I think they are hiding it because they do not know what it is, and they do not know what to do about it, and the program costs $400 billion over its planned 10-year arc and cannot be stopped because of a recurring lidar anomaly that has so far resulted in one confirmed disappearance and several crew members who came back from EVAS slightly different than they went out. And I think they have made a calculation that the mission is worth the cost, and that the cost is manageable as long as nobody talks about it publicly, and the firmware updates keep running, and the mounting bracket explanation keeps holding, and the rotations keep turning over every 5 months before anyone can accumulate enough data to see the full pattern. But I have seen the full pattern now. And the firmware update is in 6 hours. And I am writing this on a device that is not connected to the station network. And I'm going to transmit it when the update window opens, because the update will consume 90% of the station's communication bandwidth for the 40 minutes it runs. And in that window, my personal device will have enough residual bandwidth to push this document through the public deep space communication relay that is technically part of our emergency contingency infrastructure and technically accessible to any device with the right authentication codes. And I have the authentication codes because I am the instrumentation technician, and the instrumentation technician has the authentication codes for every system, including the ones that Mission Control did not realize would give me this option. I am going to send this. I made that decision at 0140. I am writing the addendum now so that whoever receives it has everything I know. Here is what I know. It was here before we built the station. The pre-settlement surveys from 2024 logged a density anomaly in the Shackleton South Face region 40 meters from what would become our station's outer south wall. It was logged as geological, a subsurface density variation consistent with impact ejecta compaction. It was not geological. When I overlay the bearing and distance from the 2024 survey anomaly against our current LiDAR readings, the position is consistent with an object that was 40 meters from our future south wall in 2024 and is currently 186 meters from our current south wall, which means it moved outward when we arrived, which means it sensed our arrival and it chose its distance, and it has been holding that distance since before we had finished unpacking the habitat modules. It did not follow us here. It was already here. It moved away from us when we came, to a distance it had calculated or chosen, and it has been there ever since, watching us build, watching us settle in, watching us run our EVAs and conduct our science and eat our meals and sleep in our bunks 6 meters from its side of the south wall. And it has been doing this not for days or weeks, but continuously, without rest, for the entire 3-year occupation of this site across 8 rotations, waiting for what I do not know, for what Yusuf apparently found out in 4 minutes and 17 seconds and could not explain to me afterward with flat eyes and a flat voice, for what Priya is finding out slowly from the inside every time she wakes up and I see her standing at the south-facing window for 20 minutes before she starts her workday. Priya has started going to the south-facing observation window every morning. I have logged it. First time was day 49, the morning after her EVA. She stood there for 4 minutes. Day 50 it was 9 minutes. Day 51 it was 14 minutes. This morning, day 52, I woke at 0300 and she was already there, and she was still there when I started writing this addendum at 0317, which means she has been standing at that window for at least 17 minutes in the dark, looking south at 186 meters of vacuum and regolith and whatever is maintaining its radius just beyond the edge of our perimeter lights. I went and stood next to her. I said her name. She looked at me, and her eyes were not completely flat. Not the way Yusuf's had been, but there was something behind them that I could not read. Something that was not quite Priya. Something that had moved into the space behind her eyes while she was standing at 188 meters on day 50, and that had been there ever since. She said, "Do you ever wonder what it sounds like?" I said, "There is no sound transmission on the lunar surface. Sound requires a medium. There is no medium outside this station." She said, "I know that. I wonder anyway." Then she turned back to the window. I went back to my workstation. I have been writing since then, and the update is in 5 hours and 40 minutes, and Priya is still at the window. Final chapter. The distance. I want to end with the thing that I keep coming back to. Not the disappearance, not the flat eyes, not the archive or the pattern or the cover story. The thing I keep coming back to is the distance itself. 183 to 191 meters. That specific range, maintained with a precision that no natural process on the moon could explain, across 50 years and multiple human visits and 3 years of continuous occupation. Why that distance? What is the significance of 183 to 191 meters to something that has been patient for longer than the space program has existed? Is it the range of our sensors, chosen deliberately so that we can detect it but only barely? Is it the range of our suit communication systems, chosen so that it can hear us but remain outside whatever it considers an intrusive threshold? Is it simply the distance at which a human being, standing alone on the surface in a suit with limited peripheral vision and limited sensor awareness, will notice the presence of something behind them and turn around, but not be able to see it clearly? A deliberate positioning in the borderland between perceived and unperceived, chosen because that borderland is where it does whatever it does most effectively. Is it 186 meters? Because that is the distance at which a human mind begins to register something without being able to process what it is registering. The distance at which the present seeps in through the edges rather than confronting the center. The distance at which 4 minutes and 17 seconds of standing still is enough to change something permanently behind a person's eyes. I do not know. I will probably never know. What I know is that it chose the distance. That choice implies knowledge of us, knowledge of our sensors and our perception and our psychology, knowledge accumulated over 50 years of watching human beings move across the surface it has occupied for longer than we can document. It knows us better than we know it. It has been studying us since 1972, and we have been explaining away its existence since 1972. And it has been patient while we do that. Patient in the way that something is patient, when it understands that patience is not a cost, but a method. The waiting is not the waiting before something happens. The waiting is the thing that happens. The waiting is the mechanism. The waiting is what it did to Yusuf over 4 minutes and 17 seconds. And what it is doing to Priya over 17 minutes every morning at the south window, and what it will do to all of us, gradually, at whatever pace it is decided is correct, until we walk outside on our own and close the distance ourselves. The update is in 4 hours. I am transmitting this now. If you are reading it, the transmission worked, and there is a record that exists outside the program's control systems, and the firmware update cannot reach it, and the cover story cannot undo it. If you are reading it, then the Apollo 17 archive and the 2024 pre-settlement survey and the 8 rotation communication logs and the LiDAR data from Ares 7 over the past 51 days are all real and all consistent, and all pointing to the same thing, occupying the same space on the same face of the same crater, and someone with more authority than I have needs to make a decision about what we do next before the 9th rotation arrives and unpacks its equipment and starts logging 0.3-second anomalies at 186 meters south-southeast, and gets told it is a calibration issue with the mounting bracket. The LiDAR sweep runs every 4 minutes. It has run 18,144 times since I arrived. In 11 of those sweeps today alone, it has logged a reading at 186 meters. Duration 0.3 seconds. Gone on the next pass, but not gone. Never gone. It has never been gone. We just had to stop pretending not to see it. Priya is at the window again. 186 meters. The update runs in 4 hours. I am not going to the window. Transmission ends. Ares 7. Day 52, 4:41 station time.